All right, we've only got 2 left, guys, and we have 2 left, but I think it might be like 4 left after the river because this is like 3 albums. So, Matt, why don't you go ahead and run the numbers? And as our resident biggest Bruce Springsteen fan, give us your take and lead it off.
Okay. So Bruce Springsteen's The River comes in at number 55 in the 1980s on Best Ever Albums, number 6 in the year 1980, number 411 of all time. It is Springsteen's 5th highest rated album, behind Born to Run is at number 1, and Born in the USA at number 2. We're going to cover that in a full bio episode in the 80s. Darkness on the Edge of Town is 3, and then Nebraska, which is going to be another cold listen in a couple weeks. So this is number 5. It did not make Rolling Stone's list, and it's a double album, fellas. And actually, on this album cover, he does kind of have a little bit of a Bob Seger, like, come hither look or something.
Bruce Springsteen kind of always does, though. He's always
that's
sort of
fair. Yeah.
What a run of albums, Jesus! Between that, ending he's Born in the USA.
Yes, that very good point. Yes, and he's the boss. All right. So to me, so first of all, obviously I love Springsteen. I think this album has some fantastic songs on it. The length of it it does hurt though. This is a little bit of Springsteen losing his fastball. And part of the reason and probably the main reason it's so long is that a lot of these songs came out of the Darkness on the Edge of Town sessions. If you guys remember, that was when we covered that album, we talked about just like Springsteen was just writing like a ridiculous amount of material at that time, and he wasn't recording it because there was this legal battle with his manager, and he couldn't go into the studio unless he had the producer that was approved by the manager who he was suing. So there was just like all this time where he was just writing but not recording. So this is as much of a result of that as anything. So and he just put it all out there. So I think the first half of this album is really strong. I mean, it's the tightest.
Like the first album.
Is the first album, yeah,
okay.
Yeah. Actually,
that would be the ties. The ties that bind to the river is disc
to the
1.
river.
It's the first
Correct.
11. Yeah, and
Correct.
disc 2 is Point Blank, which would be track 12 to Wreck on the Highway. That's album 2.
Yep. So there's a total of what is it? There's 20 songs in this record.
Yep. But it's an 11-9 split.
It's a lot of Springsteen here, and you've got big songs like "Hungry Heart's" probably the biggest song on this. "The River's" a pretty big song as well. It's got some of my favorite deep cuts. Like I love "Sherry Darling." Like that's not just because my wife is named Sherry, but just because that's just a great. That is just such a rousing, like anthemic kind of fun song. The lyrics are pretty funny too. I actually kind of wanted to play it at our wedding, but then I was like, maybe people would read into the lyrics too much because I don't want them like thinking too negatively of my mother-in-law. But it's all funny about like, tell your mom just to shut up. I'll kick her out of this car, like. But Two Hearts is great. Out in the Street, I've always loved that song, and that's one of I have a special place for that song because when I saw him play at Bonnaroo, and I was kind of like I was up towards the front, in the crowd, and he came out into the crowd during that song and like kind of was like towering right above us and stuff, and so I always think of that as well. But there's it's Springsteen. He's doing some great stuff, and then he kind of probably around "I'm a Rocker" on the second side is where I start because I think Point Blank's a really good song. I've always liked Cadillac Ranch, and then like "I'm a Rocker," "Fade Away," "Stolen Car," kind of like those 3 songs there. I'm kind of like, all right, did those really need to be? Did those need to be on here? I actually like Ramrod. I think that's okay. He kind of brings me back a little bit there. Price
Start
You
calling
Pay is
you Ramrod.
Yeah, do that. I'll take that. Ramrod. So, and the last couple songs are decent, but this album is not. I mean, particularly the second half is not why I love Springsteen, And I think that this definitely could have used some editing. It's double albums, man. We have to. I kind of have to go back and think about the double albums that we've covered.
Oh, London Calling.
Yeah, I forget that's a
Physical
double
Graffiti.
album.
All Things Must Pass.
Goodbye Yellow
That's
Brick
a triple album. That's I'd say that's a bit much, but even some of those other ones, it's like I don't know if it needs to be. I don't know if there could be some songs that we could chop up. Maybe not London I probably would chop a couple songs off London Calling. But anyway, like, it's hard to make a perfect double album.
Sure.
This certainly is not a perfect double album. But it does have lots of elements of Springsteen that are great, that I really like. It's also got elements of Springsteen that are over the top. So, like I said, I think the first side, Ties That Bind, is a great opening song. I like Jackson Cage a lot. Independence Day is a beautiful song. That's pretty sure that's about his dad, and like a lot of these, probably half the songs in here are about his dad, really. But and The River, yeah, I love I'll say this, The River. If you guys ever listen to, there's a right around kind of like 1985, he released a triple live album, that's a lot, but there's a version of The River on there, which is just like they rock out at the end. The piano, Roy Batan's piano on that is great. So I love that, and every time I hear the real version of The River, I'm left a little nonplussed because I think that they really nailed it on that live version. But it's still it's a great song. So it's thumbs up on Springsteen. It's not as good as the other two that we'd covered, and it's not one of my favorite Springsteen albums, but it's really solid. It just could have used some editing.
Well, we've covered 3, Matt, so just a FYI there.
Right, I don't count the first one's kind of, what was it, the Wild Industry, These Few
Wild
Shuffles?
Yep,
I like
album.
this better than that, considerably more than that. So that's got that word salad that John talked about earlier. So.
Oh boy, gosh, where do I could talk about this album for an hour, because to me this is the Bruce Springsteeniest album of all Bruce Springsteen albums. It's everything about Bruce Springsteen, good, bad, in the middle. It's like, it's clear he walked in and like at this point he's a star, and they're like, Bruce, you know, we're going to give you whatever you want finally. And he's like, I'm going to make an album that's everything I ever wanted to make, ever. And it's going to be everything that I am. I'm going to write about cars. I'm going to write about my dad, you know, Mary and Johnny. You know, now
women
life sucks. Women in cars. Life sucks for them. And I'm going to kind of, half the time, write really profound things that make John in particular terrified, because they strike incredibly close to home. As someone who grew up literally in Springsteen country, it's like, oh shit, that's the stuff like is terrifying that I was running away. I and Bruce Springsteen, everybody like of a certain era, we were the people that managed to get out of Johnny and Maria and didn't get the shitty jobs and divorces and stuff. And so like that's that. And then it's like, and then it's like there's a lot of like looking back nostalgia, but like whereas later it gets a little bit more uplifting. This is when like I don't know if Springsteen likes the people that were in Greetings Raspberry Park and, you know, and Wild in the East Street Shuffle, and then and I always wonder, like, is part of it him? And is part of it like, I didn't really love that, and now life's complex, kind of? Because I always listen to this as like, you know, the Springsteen albums are always like, you know, the people, you know, Sloppy Sue, Big Balls Billy, Johnny, Marie, all these people, right? These archetypes of Central Jersey people, right? Like, you know, factory town, blue collar, you know, ethnic, you know, just, it's like people I know because it's where I grew up. Like, this is where, like, shit's going down for that. Like, Darkness on the Edge of Town was, Born to Run was like, we're gonna, you know, we may not have a lot, but we're gonna go for it. So it's kind of hopeful. And the Darkness on the Edge of Town is like, I don't know about this. And like the Rivers, when like, you know, basically this is the postscript for these people, because by Nebraska he's writing about more general character sketches and Born in the USA as well, right? So I always feel like this is sort of like when life got real bad for those characters. And then like later they kind of recover, because I think like 2000 Springsteen, right, is about redeeming those characters, and I can't help but think that many of his people who like love him like live the same life to some degree. It's also fascinating to me when like upper middle class people listen to Springsteen and like they get all the nostalgia, right, and like the vibe, and they get none of like the depressing like does he hate these people vibe, because the river is an objectively horrifying song. It is. It's like everything that was like it was like what would have happened to me in my life if I did the things that I watched other people do around me happen. And Springsteen's like, you get that? I'm like, I get that. Like, I get that in my bones. And like to the point where I taught that song when I was teaching, because I thought it was such a good allegory, and I mean, there's like a crushing desperation of like, they get married they're in love, they get married too early, they have a kid, too early, you get a job, it's stealing your soul, and then you don't even have that love anymore, and like, what is life? I mean, like, it's also a Springsteen allegory. It's like, is the dream alive if it don't come true, or is it something more? I mean, that's that's maybe the best set of lines Bruce Springsteen ever wrote, and he's got some good ones. I make fun of him a lot for stuff, but like, he does have some great ones. There's other songs I like. I like Jackson Cage is a song I've always liked from Bruce Springsteen. I'm of Independence Day. I like the second album it wasn't needed. I'll be honest, the first 11 tracks really should have been this album, in my opinion. I guess you can argue for individual things and maybe tack them on for 12 or 13, but there isn't a self-indulgence to this where I feel like after a while, like I've heard the story, and I heard the story better on disc 1, and by the time I get to there's some objectively awful songs on disc 2. Like even like Wreck on the Highway is a really bad song. Like I'm a Rocker is a really bad song. These are songs where they're almost like cliches where I'm just like,
Cadillac Ranch isn't necessarily good.
No, there's another one, and all of those
I like Cadillac Ranch.
I mean, I get it, because like what Springsteen is to like, and I get like I get it. Like I do, like if you go to Springsteen and you like him because he represents like a 3-hour concert and upbeat music, and I will say this is my favorite E Street Band album. To me, the E Street Band works best here. Like in other albums, I think they go over the top and everything seems like it's designed to be played for 15 minutes at a live show, which I don't love that vibe. This album has like a couple of those songs like Hungry Heart and stuff, but I feel like actually this is when the E Street Band's at its tightest. And this is where I was like, I really can appreciate it, because it's not overwhelming sax solos that it's like, oh, all right, now it's your turn to go. Okay. We're going to have a indulgent, drum or guitar. This is the right mix for that. So this is my favorite E Street Band album. But yeah, this is, I totally get if your thing, and you listen to Springsteen and you're like, wow, this is uplifting, positive music, because it does sound it musically, because it's got gospel revival and old time rock and roll. But to me, the part of Springsteen I connect with is the part where, in general, but especially as a New Jerseyan who grew up like where he did pretty much, where like I almost feel like he's telling me, I kind of hate these people, and I won by not being these people, right? Like I won. Like I'm not them, right? I got out. Like I got out. It didn't happen to me. I didn't do, you know what I mean? And like there's a part that I always feel is an undercurrent of it where it's kind of like, you people celebrate these people, but you kind of know that I respect these people and I respect their journey, but also I didn't want to be them. And I don't think people get that.
It's kind of cynical. But like,
I mean, do you see the lyrics? Hungry Heart and The River, the two biggest songs. They're not exactly uplifting songs.
I was just about to say with Hungry Heart.
There's people that think Glory Days is an uplifting. Yeah. Glory Days is about being a loser, basically.
Hungry Heart's like the most poppy song on this record, and it's like, whoa, it's guys like,
well, Darkness on the Edge of Town. Darkness on the Edge of Town and Darkness on the Edge of Town and Prove It All. These are like depressing ass songs. You know what I mean?
So is he rubbing people's faces in it, John? Are you going?
No, I think he deeply, much like me, I think he deeply respects these people. But like, you can deeply respect people, but also know you have to get out, and that's why Born to Run's the desperation to get out when you know better from what it is. And these are the albums. It's like I'm almost cataloging what it's like for the people like I left behind.
Well, that's where he does such a good job of like painting a portrait of the story of these people's lives. I mean,
well, and Nebraska's where he turns it beyond just his own world, right? Yeah. And that's So, but I don't mean take up so much air, Josh. I'm interested to hear your take.
Yeah, I mean, I think The River is probably like one of my favorite sad songs of all time. It's so like, I love how it starts with the harmonica and really, it's like. as soon as I hear that harmonica, like I'm hooked. Like I'll listen to that song every time I hear it. And despite the fact that it's like the Boulevard of Broken Dreams, essentially, people that didn't get out, like you said, or stuck in kind of their factory towns. But
I always got the vibe that it's like he's driving the car into the river, but he can't even do that because the river's dry. Don't you get that vibe, right? That's what he's going for. It's like you're driving into the river to get away from it, but you can't because there is no river. It's dry, so the worst thing possible. You're stuck living this life that has no... That's what the allegory is, guys. That's what it is.
You're like the guy at the end of the Metallica video who can't, who's alive, but he can't see, speak, or... Yeah.
I'm of similar mind to you guys. I think this is like Springsteen thesis on all of his themes and what he's interested in, at least in this early part of his career. And unlike Darkness on the Edge of Time, there is some sort of like more positivity, especially on the back half. A lot of these songs are like rollicking, good time songs, even though sometimes the themes aren't, the stories in them aren't necessarily positive. But like Hungry Heart, right? That's kind of like a fun song, even though the lyrics are not like fun. Yeah. So, and that happens over and over. I also agree with you guys. I think that the first album is better than the second overall. I feel like songs like Independence Day and Jackson Cage are kind of lesser songs to me. They're kind of derivative of better songs that he's done, I think. But I love some of these other songs, especially Out in the Street, and I like something like Point Blank too on the first song on the second album. That's got kind of like a really dark, like noir feel to it to me for some reason. A crime ridden song, which I really like, and The Price You Pay too. I like that song.
If you like that, you'll love Nebraska, because that's nothing but songs about bandits and
I love Nebraska. So this is you're not going to change anyone's mind about like a new side of Springsteen when you listen to this album. You're like, you should know going in what you're going to get, and it's just kind of him, I guess, at the peak of his powers, doing what he does best is what I'm trying to say. I don't like this album as much as Darkness on the Edge of Town. I still think that's higher in my rankings, but I mean, this is one of those songs, like, if you stop paying attention, like, the next song will be good. If you weren't into that one song, the next song will be really good, or you'll find a part that you like about it. And it's good. What can you? It's not reinventing the Springsteen wheel, but it's really good.
Well, would you say peak of the powers Springsteen is Born to Run, River, or Born in the USA? Because I would always answer Born in the USA.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's
peak Springsteen powers.
Yeah, that's the apex, I think. But
what do you say, Matt?
Well, in terms of his commercial appeal, for sure. I mean, that album was massive. But in terms of like, what do I think of like is the I
mean the most quintessentially Bruce Springsteen. Like, what is the most?
Yeah, well, I would say this: if you're going to start with Springsteen, I probably would say go to Born in the USA is just, I guess, it's one of those things where I'd say that that's maybe the way to go. But I think that Born to Run is his best album.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, so I think Born in the USA. Well, there's not a bad song on that album. So,
of the run we've done so far, what's your favorite? I know Matt's is Born to Run. What's yours, Josh?
I think Darkness on the Edge of Town.
I think that would be my choice too. Darkness on the Edge of Town. Yeah.
Yeah, this was fun to see. A couple of years ago, he did like a 30th anniversary tour, and he played the entirety of this album. And I saw it twice.
Wow!
I saw him do it once in Florida, and then like a week later, I was in upstate New York visiting a buddy, and we went. So I saw it like twice in two different states in the same week.
Did he change the album? Like this one time you go and you get the Ghost of Tom Joad or something, and you're like, God damn it! Like
not quite, no. But he did, and I wish I probably thought that you would have loved it, John, because at the very beginning, he, like, before he starts like going into it, he just does this like long kind of monologue about like why he created the album and like the what was behind it, and he basically said kind of similar to what you just said. I wanted to capture all of this and all of that and put it.
I mean, it's so obvious when you look at his lyrics. I mean, he's writing about these, and I appreciate that about it because it's like a story arc.
Yes.
I'm just amazed how many people don't get that most of the story arc is fucking bleak.
Yeah.
Like, really bleak. Like, and
for me, like, it's not that I'm not aware of that, but again, like, it's if I'm seeing him live or I'm listening to his album, like, it's I love the music and I'm just going there, and a lot of that is kind of the upbeat, fun music, and even the sadder songs are just like, man, that's just really pretty. Like, I'm thinking of the pretty, the melody behind it, and the sadness is like, okay, but it's secondary. Like, that's not what's connecting with me. It's the feel of the music, and like, maybe other fans don't feel that way, but I can only speak for myself. So
I kind of always have had a thesis that like Springsteen had a beginning career, right? And for a while it was lining up, and then somewhere along the line, I think probably like around Born in the USA, like he was suspecting it, but somewhere along the line he realized that a not insignificant amount of his fan base wasn't getting it. And so then he just kind of leaned into two personas, like one that was able to be listened to by corporate people that leaned Republican and stuff, and like they didn't get any of the context he was throwing in, right? But they go to his concerts and go, oh my God, my favorite artist is Bruce, like as encapsulated by like Chris Christie and stuff, like people like that, where like Chris Christie's going, he's like, oh man, he so speaks to me, right? And like every song is in every way an indictment of like him, right? And Springsteen, I think, is a really smart guy, and I think like he realized that, and there's a subversive nature to him that I think is very methodical, that he does on purpose. And I always think like there's a part of him that's smirking behind the scenes, like, half of my audience doesn't get any of this, and I'm going to play for 4 hours for them because I love to perform. But then there's like other people who might get bits and pieces of it, but kind of to some degree I can still be private while being public and doing my songs, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And I just think sometimes he looks at his audience and goes, I love playing in front of these people, but maybe only 5% of the people here have any idea what I'm going for. So it's I've always felt that about him, which is why I like him as a person quite a bit, even though sometimes his music is hit and miss for me.
I mean, is it really that subversive? As soon as you start reading the lyrics, you can like tell.
Well, that's what I'm saying. He puts it right out there, but no one gets it.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, he's got one of the most famously misunderstood songs in Born in the USA, right? And people listen to Glory Days and are like, ooh. Even Born to Run, to some degree, is desperate, you know? It's like, it's a thing, but it's very desperate, and it's kind of delusional, you know? And it's... I just feel he puts it out there and kind of no one gets it because they're like, listen to the goddamn saxophone. And can you believe he does? And like, and meanwhile, he's just like, here's the saxophone and the guitars, but
I guess
it's right here.
Yeah, he does a good job of couching.
I mean, Christ, he named an album Darkness on the Edge of Town, for God's sakes.
Yeah, no, that's
and when they're still at the early stages, it's called The Wild, the Innocent, and the East Street. I mean, that's where I just kind of laugh. I'm like, how are people not getting this? But they don't. So, yeah. So
thumbs up from all of us, it sounds like.
I'll go thumbs in the middle for me, because if it was a 12-song album, I'd go thumbs up. It's trending up.
Oh no, I'm still. I agree. It should be a single album, but I'm still definitely a thumbs up. There's plenty of stuff on here to keep me interested.
Whenever I have to stop an album and revisit it, it's too fucking long, and that's what I had to do right here.
It's fair.
Yeah, maybe if it was spaced differently and the songs I connected with but they were so concentrated on disc one that it kind of lost me after a while. So.